When I paid for our family dinner, my wife's sister joked, "You're just the wallet with legs." I laughed, then opened my phone and said, "Funny you say that. I just froze our joint account." My wife's eyes went wide as her sister choked on her wine. The night it happened, I hadn't intended to do anything different. If anything, I expected it to go just like every other family dinner. Me footing the bill, her family pretending it was nothing, and me pretending I didn't mind. But something in me cracked that evening, and what came out wasn't anger exactly. It was clarity. Cold, quiet, overdue clarity. We were at Luca's, this Italian place in downtown Charleston that's become kind of a family staple over the years. White tablecloths, warm lighting, overpriced specials that somehow never live up to the description. We always end up there for birthdays, holidays, or just because dinners. I was sitting at the far end of the table. My wife, Kelsey, sat next to me, dressed in a navy blue blouse she wore often when we went out. Her sister, Brenna, was across from her, sipping wine with that smug smile that never quite disappeared from her face. Brenna's husband, Leo, scrolled through his phone between forced attempts at conversation, and their mother, Lorraine, hovered somewhere between disinterested and judgmental. The usual cast. The usual script. The check came. I reached for it. No hesitation. I always paid. No one even looked at the receipt anymore. That's when Brenna let it fly. "You're just the wallet with legs, Barrett," she said, tipping her glass in my direction like she was making a toast. Her laugh was dry and sharp, like she'd been saving that one. Everyone laughed. Lightly, casually, like it was just another harmless jab. Kelsey didn't flinch, didn't glance at me. She laughed, too. The kind of laugh that isn't loud, but loud enough to tell me she didn't mind. And I did what I've always done. I smiled. But something stirred in me. A kind of slow burn. And without saying much, I pulled out my phone, tapped around for a moment, then looked up from the screen and said in the same tone one might use to mention the weather, "Funny you say that. I just froze our joint account." It took a moment for the words to land. Brenna stopped mid-sip, her glass hitting her lip with a soft clink before she coughed, choking slightly on her wine. Kelsey turned sharply toward me, eyes wide, stunned silent for a beat. Lorraine muttered a half-hearted, "Oh my." And Leo looked up from his phone for the first time in 20 minutes. The table went quiet, the air pulling tight like someone had sked all the warmth out of the room. I didn't explain. I didn't offer a reason. I just looked back down at my plate, took another bite of my cold pasta, and let the silence settle. Kelsey didn't say much on the ride home. She sat with her arms crossed, body turned slightly away from me in the passenger seat, her lips tight. I could see her trying to form words. 100 things she wanted to say, all tangled up. When we got home, she went straight to the bedroom without a word. I stayed in the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stared out the window. The streetlights cast long shadows across the driveway, and the silence in the house felt different. It wasn't just tense, it was final. That night, I slept on the couch. Not because she told me to. Because I couldn't imagine lying next to her and pretending everything was fine. The truth is, it hadn't been fine for a long time. We met 10 years ago at a wedding in Asheville. She was witty, clever, had this quiet confidence that pulled you in. I was 32, working remote for a software company based in Denver, doing well for myself. She was a freelance designer back then, full of ambition, with a portfolio that showed real talent. We hit it off quickly. She was different from anyone I'd known. We got married after 2 years of dating. Small ceremony, just friends and close family. The first year was good, really good. We moved into a modest house in Charleston. I set up a home office, and she started working on launching her own design studio. I supported her. Financially, emotionally, whatever she needed. I wanted her to succeed. But months passed, and the clients didn't come. She kept designing, kept trying, but with each passing season, she stopped talking about her projects and started focusing on other things. New furniture for the house, boutique skincare, expensive wellness retreats with Brenna. Whenever I brought up budgeting or being careful with spending, she'd wave it off. "It's an investment in myself," she'd say. Then there was her family, Lorraine, who lived in a retirement community with monthly fees that could cover someone's rent. I paid a chunk of it every month. Kelsey never asked. She just assumed. Brenna and Leo? They struggled. A lot. Leo got laid off during the pandemic, and Brenna hadn't worked in years. We helped them with their mortgage a few times. Again, not because I offered. Because I was volunteered. I started to feel like I wasn't part of a family. I was a resource. Every dinner, every holiday, every get-together, they all expected me to pay. And I did. Because it was easier. Because I didn't want to make things awkward. Because Kelsey would tell me, "It's not a big deal." And I wanted to believe her. But it was a big deal. Especially when the people you're helping start treating you like you're lucky just to be included. I started checking our finances more closely. The picture wasn't pretty. Credit cards maxed out. Loans I hadn't signed. Money withdrawn from our joint account that I never saw. Thousands spent on things I didn't even recognize. She hadn't just been careless. She'd been hiding things. I confronted her the next morning. She was defensive at first, then tearful. Said she felt like a failure. That she didn't want me to see her that way. That she spent to cope, to feel like she still had control. I didn't want to disappoint you, she said. You didn't disappoint me, I replied quietly. You stopped being honest with me. After that, she moved into her mother's condo for a while. Said she needed space. I didn't argue. I started seeing a therapist. Talking through things I'd never put into words before. About how I'd grown up believing love meant sacrifice. That keeping the peace was more important than standing up for myself. That being good meant being quiet, being agreeable. Turns out, peace at any cost isn't peace. It's surrender. We filed for divorce 3 months later. Amicable, technically. No kids, no house to split. But not without damage. Sometimes I still think about her. Not in a hopeful way. More like remembering an old injury that aches in the cold. Last I heard, Brenna and Leo were separated. Apparently, Leo got tired of being told he wasn't enough. Kelsey texted me recently. Said she's working again. Asked if I want to talk. I haven't answered yet. Not because I'm angry. I'm just not sure what I'd say. The house felt bigger after she left. It was quiet in a way that wasn't peaceful, just hollow. The kind of quiet that makes you hyper-aware of every creak in the floor, every ticking second on the wall clock. I used to think of that space as our home. But walking into the bedroom now felt like entering someone else's life. She hadn't taken much with her. A few clothes, some toiletries, her laptop. Her favorite mug was still in the cabinet. The one with the cracked handle she insisted on using anyway. I found it 2 days after she left, washed it, then put it right back on the shelf. I don't know why. That week, I got a call from Lorraine. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. She didn't waste time. You've really hurt her, Barrett, she said. Her voice had that cool, composed tone I'd come to expect. The kind that sounded like concern, but always carried a layer of judgment beneath. She's hurting because of choices she made. I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. She made those choices because she thought you'd be there, she said. You've always been the stable one. You knew her family situation. You knew she wasn't like you. There it was. That line. That unspoken divide between them and me. Between us and them. I was the one who worked, who saved, who paid. And by doing so, I'd accidentally become the scapegoat for their frustrations and failures. She stopped being honest with me. I said, that's not something you fix by pretending everything's fine. There was silence on the line, then a quick, clipped goodbye. I never heard from Lorraine again. In the weeks that followed, I kept things quiet. Work helped. My clients didn't care about my personal life. They just needed systems fixed, data cleaned, network stabilized. It was clean, logical, predictable work. A welcome contrast to everything else. At night, I took long walks around the neighborhood. Sometimes I'd end up by the small park down the street, watching families toss footballs or walk dogs. There was something grounding about it. People just living, laughing, arguing over who left the porch light on. Normal stuff. I started journaling again, something I hadn't done since college. The pages filled up quickly, rants, reflections, old memories that bubbled up without warning. I wrote about our first apartment. The night we stayed up until 2 a.m. painting the walls while drinking boxed wine. I wrote about the quiet mornings we used to have, her curled up on the couch sketching logos, me with coffee and my laptop. How she used to hum when she worked. This little tune that didn't have a melody but was soothing just the same. It wasn't all bad. And that made it worse, somehow. Because the betrayal didn't come from a villain. It came from someone I loved. Someone I trusted. I ran into Leo at the grocery store one afternoon. It was awkward. He was buying a 6-pack and frozen burritos. We exchanged the kind of nod that says, yeah, life's messy. He looked thinner, tired. Didn't expect to see you here, he said after a long pause. Yeah, same, I replied. We stood there for a moment. Then he said, for what it's worth, I knew it wasn't right. The way they treated you. I should have said something. You had your hands full, I said. Still, he shrugged. Brenna. She doesn't like hearing no. She'll have to get used to it. He cracked a small smile. You doing all right? I'm getting there. He nodded. If you ever want to grab a beer or something, I'm around. I wasn't sure how I felt about that, but I appreciated it. I told him I'd think about it. We haven't spoken since. A few weeks later, I finally sat down and really combed through our finances. It was worse than I'd thought. Not catastrophic, but messy. The kind of mess that doesn't fix itself. There were credit cards in her name tied to the account. Old subscriptions she never canceled. One to a streaming service I didn't even recognize. I froze everything I could, started making calls, and got a financial advisor involved. I was embarrassed at how long I'd gone without looking. I'd just trusted her. Trusted that she was managing things like I was. But trust without accountability? That's just denial in disguise. I also found a few old emails. Things she'd forwarded to herself. Client leads she never followed up on. Opportunities she let slide. There were replies from people asking if she was still interested in working with them. Some dated back almost a year. She had every chance to make things work. She just didn't. That's when the sadness really hit me. Not because I missed her, but because I realized she didn't want what we had badly enough to protect it. It's strange, grieving someone who's still alive, who's just a few miles away, who still posts on social media like life is normal. I saw a post from Brenna not long after. A photo of a new dining set. Caption said, "New chapter, new furniture." The comments were all hearts and congratulations. I didn't comment. One night, Kelsey texted me again. Simple message, "I miss you. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't type anything. I put the phone down and went outside instead. The night was warm, humid, the kind of southern spring air that sticks to your skin. I sat on the porch steps, listened to the crickets, and just breathed. Because sometimes, silence says what words can't. The silence between us stretched out like a thread neither of us wanted to cut, but neither of us could pull on either. I didn't respond to her message that night. Or the next day. I thought I might. I even drafted a reply a few times. "We can talk, but I need you to be honest." Then deleted it. What is there to say? Deleted. I'm not ready. That one stayed in my notes for 2 days. I didn't know what she wanted from me. Closure? Forgiveness? Another chance? I wasn't sure what I could give her, let alone what she deserved. And I wasn't ready to confront how much of myself I'd lost in that marriage until it was over. A week after that text, I finally saw her again. I was sitting outside at Kudu Coffee on King Street. Good weather, laptop open, pretending to answer work emails when really I was just people watching. It was something I'd started doing a lot. Sitting in public, surrounded by strangers, gave me the illusion of connection without the work. It was easier that way. No need to explain anything. No one knew me here. She walked by? Alone. She didn't see me at first. She had her hair tied back, wearing a gray hoodie I recognized. Mine, actually. One I'd forgotten she even took. She stopped at the counter, ordered something iced, then waited with her arms crossed, scrolling through her phone. For a second, I didn't move. I just watched her. It hit me in a way I didn't expect. Not longing. Not even anger. Just realization. She looked like the same person, but I was seeing her differently. Eventually, she turned. Our eyes met. She froze for just a moment. Then, with a small, hesitant smile, she walked over. "Hey," she said, careful. "Quiet." "Hey," I replied. Neither of us sat. Neither of us reached for the other. "How have you been?" she asked, though the answer was probably in my face. I'd lost some weight. My beard had grown out a little. The stress had aged me in ways I hadn't noticed until I saw myself through her eyes. "All right," I said. "Working. Trying to figure things out." She nodded. "Me too." I gestured to the chair across from me. She didn't sit. Just looked at it like it was asking more of her than she was ready for. "I didn't expect to run into you," she said. "Yeah, same." "I meant what I said," she added. "I do miss you." I didn't answer right away. There were too many responses battling for space in my throat. I could have told her I missed her too, that I missed the version of us that didn't exist anymore. I could have told her I wasn't ready to open any doors she'd closed behind her. Instead, I said, "You should take the hoodie." She looked down, like she'd forgotten she was wearing it. Then she smiled a little, the kind of smile people give when they're not sure if they should laugh or apologize. "I'll let you go," she said, and turned before I could respond. I didn't watch her walk away. Later that night, I found myself back on the couch with a notebook in my lap, flipping back through pages I'd written over the past few months. Patterns jumped out at me, words I repeated, themes I kept circling around. Words like disappear, drift, enough. It occurred to me that so much of what I'd held on to during our marriage wasn't about love, it was about obligation. About trying to prove I was the kind of man who stuck it out, who fixed things, who didn't give up when it got hard. But love that becomes a debt, that's not love anymore. That's guilt dressed in commitment. I started writing again that night. Not just journaling, but really writing. Short essays. Thoughts about marriage, money, masculinity. Nothing polished. Just raw truths. Things I never said out loud. Things I never let myself admit when I was in the middle of it all. It felt good. Like cleaning out a cluttered attic. Kelsey texted again a few days later. "I read your post. The one about being invisible in your own home. I'm sorry. I had shared one of my pieces anonymously on a local writing forum. I didn't think anyone I knew would ever find it." She had. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want apologies. I wanted honesty. Growth. Something real. But that's not something you can ask for. It's something people choose. Still, I typed a reply. Short. Direct. "Thank you." I didn't say more. Not because I didn't have more to say, but because sometimes, less carries more weight. The house was slowly beginning to feel like mine again. Not just a place I lived, but a space that reflected who I was becoming. I'd sold the dining table she picked out. Bought a simpler one. Donated the framed prints from the living room. The ones she said brought warmth, but always felt cold to me. I kept the books. The records. The old guitar gathering dust in the corner. I started playing again. Badly, but it felt right. There's something about rediscovering parts of yourself you forgot you had. Like finding an old sweatshirt in the back of the closet that still fits better than anything new. Friends started asking questions. Quietly, cautiously. My coworker Devin invited me out for drinks more often. My neighbor, Margot, dropped off banana bread and asked if I needed anything. I appreciated it, but I also learned how to be alone without feeling lonely. I still thought about Kelsey, some nights more than others. But the ache was duller now. Not gone, but manageable. Like an old scar that stopped throbbing, even if it still itched when it rained. The real change, though, was internal. I'd always prided myself on being dependable, steady, a rock. But sometimes rocks get eroded from standing still too long. I didn't want to be that anymore. I didn't want to be the man who just endured. I wanted to become someone who chose his own peace, who saw red flags and didn't call them decorations, who loved but didn't shrink for it. The journey wasn't over. Not even close. But for the first time in years, it felt like it had truly begun. A few more months passed. Spring slid into summer, and with it came a kind of quiet confidence I hadn't felt in years. I was no longer waking up with knots in my stomach or pretending I was okay when I wasn't. I was okay, actually okay. And the more I leaned into that, the more I began thinking less about what I had lost and more about what I was gaining. One day, I got an email from a mid-sized tech publication based out of Charlotte. Someone had read one of my essays from the forum, passed it along, and they were interested in having me write a column, something ongoing, maybe monthly. They said they liked my tone, said it felt real. I accepted. I started writing about everything I had been through, not naming names, but sharing the rawness of it all. Being used, being quiet, being seen as a paycheck. The comments poured in. Messages from men, women, older folks, even young professionals. People thanking me for saying what they hadn't been able to. It was cathartic, but it was also something more. It was mine. A part of myself I had never tapped into before. And then the unexpected happened. I got a call from Brenna. I almost let it go to voicemail. But the idea of not hearing what she had to say was more tempting than ignoring it. Barrett, she said, her voice brittle but calm. I think you need to know what's going on. I leaned back in my office chair. Okay. She cleared her throat. Kelsey's been using your name on some things. Financially, she took out a small line of credit 6 months ago, used your old joint account address as the billing contact. I found out because the bank called me trying to reach her. Said she listed me as a reference. I closed my eyes. Took a deep breath. You're sure? I wouldn't call if I wasn't. She's in a bit of a spiral. Of course she was. And now, I had a choice. I called my lawyer. The next few weeks moved fast. Paper trails were uncovered. Misuse of financial data. Technical fraud. Not enough to press charges, but enough to trigger a financial investigation. Her credit got hit hard. She lost a freelance contract when the agency ran a background check and flagged the irregularities. She reached out again. First an apology, then a sob story, then a request for help. I didn't answer. I was done being the emergency contact for someone who treated me like a spare tire. But that wasn't the satisfying part. The satisfying part came quietly, when one of my pieces went viral, an essay titled, When Your Love is a Loan with No Interest Returned. It was published in syndication, then got picked up by a national digital magazine. My inbox flooded. I was invited to speak at a panel about financial boundaries in relationships. Me, the wallet with legs. I accepted. I stood in front of a room full of people, most older than me, some clearly worn down by similar stories, and I talked about reclaiming your worth. Not just financially, but emotionally. I spoke with clarity, with peace, with no venom. I didn't need revenge in the form of destruction. I got it in the form of evolution. But fate has a way of circling back. A month later, I was walking out of a bookstore on King Street. They'd just started carrying a collection of essays that included one of mine. The clerk had asked me to sign a few copies. It felt surreal. That's when I saw her. Kelsey, sitting on a bench, earbuds in, tapping through her phone. She looked tired. Not broken, just worn down. Like life had finally caught up to the version of herself she tried to hide from. She looked up. Our eyes met. And she smiled. Weakly. Hopefully. I nodded. Not with anger. Not even with sympathy. Just a soft acknowledgement. A full circle moment. I didn't stop to talk. Didn't know her that. I walked past her. And I didn't look back. That was the end of it. No screaming. No confrontation. Just truth meeting consequence. And me walking away lighter than I'd ever been. The best revenge wasn't destroying her. It was no longer needing to.